This video is an introduction for subdivision modeling in Rhino. It is a small design exercise which ends up into a model which can be 3D printed. And it's based on lines, on curves. And these curves are extruded with loft function, converted into a sub-D model. And in subdivision, it is modeled, has some transformation, and ends up at the end of the day in a printable 3D object like you see here right now. My starting point are curves, and what you can see here is a really simple alphabet, and I just take the letter K and T, also related to my name. And I just copy this and just move on my other layer, layer 0 design, and activate this and switch everything off. And in my top view, I organize it that they sit nicely in my center of my origin. If I want to move these objects, it's good to click it on one point to wait 1 or 2 seconds, and then you can just move it without transforming the object. This is important. Also here again, you just click on the T, you hold it for a second, and then you can move it properly on top of the other surface. The whole object, the dimension of the outside is 10 by 10 centimeters or 100 by 1 millimeters, because I am in millimeter. So what I did, I experimented a little bit with my objects, and I just move my T 100 centimeters on top as a copy, or not as a copy, first like this, and then I copy the object, string C, string V, again, and I move this down again like -50. So I have 3 objects, and this object here in the lower area, I just scaled a little bit down. I hold my shift key and I just scale it down a little bit. And this was more or less the starting point of my object. And I experimented with a lot of variations until I was happy about this. I want to use these 3 curves to create a 3D object. And what I can do, I can just select them from bottom to top or top to bottom. And I can use the loft function to morph it from one shape, one curve to the other. There's a loft function with polysurfaces. You just enter loft. And here we go, you have your loft function, and these are seams. I talk about this a little bit later. And then you have your loft function with smooth lines and straight lines, which is good for planar surfaces. By the way, if you see it like this, sometimes I swap my viewport to flat shaded to actually see better if these surfaces are planar. But there's also a better way of doing this, because actually we work with subdivision, because in subdivision tool there is also a loft function. You just find it here in the menu, sub-D loft, and if I just click on this, you also have the seams, but you're immediately in your subdivision modeling tool. In the setup of the menu, you have several options. Here with this design, creases definitely has an impact. And if you want to learn more about this, just enter sub-D loft and just read up on these options. And one thing is probably also interesting to adjust the amount of the segments. If I go to a very low level, you can see that something like this comes out of this. We want to look a little bit closer on how to adjust these seams. I just select again these curves, and I go into my sub-D loft function, and you can see that with your mouse you can just change the position of these points, and these are the looping points of your loft, and somewhere like this. And you can also turn them around. You can just flip this. For example, they all now go into the same direction, D-clockwise. And if I press on this one, then you can see that I changed this direction. and this now goes clockwise. So 2 in de-clockwise direction, 1 in clockwise direction, and I just finished my loft, and you can see that it has a really weird twist. Go out again, and I just go again into my sub-D, and again I just move these points to the same spot, but it didn't have a clockwise or de-clockwise. And here you see that this already looks good. So the direction and the position of your looping points definitely count regarding your design. If you want to get one step further in terms of your flexibility of your design, there's one really interesting feature which is called record history. If I activate this and I just go again into my subdivision, and I just finished this right now really quickly. This looks good with creases not important to me right now. And I finished this. Then you can just take the control points and you're still able to change the design, and it just follows. And this is possible because of your record history tool. So this is another good way of improving your design. With my design, I want to have the top surface closed, and there's one command which is called cap, but cap needs planar surfaces. So if I just use cap, first of all, you can see that my history, my record history, does not work anymore because I put a command on top, but probably you were happy with your changes before. I just go into OK, I accept this. And to be honest, I'm a little bit surprised that this worked properly, because normally my experience with polysurfaces is like this, that it only works if the object is based on planar surfaces like the lower area. So if you have any problems with cap function here, then I recommend that you keep this planar and then start to model your object. So if I just enter cap, this is the normal way of when I use it with polysurface objects, and it worked well. It also worked well with my transformation of the top surface, but anyhow, if you have any problems, then just keep it straight at the beginning. I also changed again to my flat shaded. I deactivate my flat shaded, and you can see that it's a really nice and smooth surface. In my video, we see now a discontinuity because the following part is based on a 3D model, which is not done with the loft function in subdivision, but I did it with the loft function and normal polysurface. So don't be surprised. What I want to do right now, the only thing, and then the video continues, I just go into sub-D and I just select this part of my 3D model, the top part, and I can just say I want to remove the creases, and then it's nice and round, and then it probably already looks quite similar. I do the same thing on this part to the following part of this video. I select this object and I move this object to a new layer, design 3D. And I also activate this layer and switch off everything else to be able to work on this properly. We first want to look at the object, and when I select my object, I can just enter points on, and then you can see the control points for distorting your object. And what is really interesting, that you can also use the tab key. And with the tab key, you can just swap between this box view, which is more or less like showing the boundaries of the control point, and again, the shaded object. So points on is something really handy. You can also just say, obviously, points off. And just changing with your tab key between these two views is also really handy regarding modeling. If I hold my string and my shift key, I can also select these faces. And if you can't see, if it just doesn't select the whole face in terms of showing it completely yellow, you can just see that I'm still in this flat shade mode, and I would like to see it really nice and smooth. And if you change like this, then it looks much better already. And you can just select these surfaces in your sub-D. And of course, also when you start moving them, you can use this for modeling really easily. It's good to know that there are a lot of tools for subdivision, and you just swap in your menu to subdivision. And there are a lot of basic primitives you can also create for subdivision, for example, like this ball. And if I just select this face of this ball, you can see the gumball, and it's probably something you're not aware of, that this gumball obviously shows into the direction of the viewport. If I just click right mouse click on this gumball, you can say align to object, and then it is perpendicular to your face, which is probably something you want. And then you can see that you can just use parts of it to transform. And if this part is too big, really interesting, you can also just say you select this and you can subdivide this part. I just do this somewhere like this, and then you can just take a smaller part and, for example, just say that you want to extrude only this part, or I just go back and I just select an edge, for example, like this, and I just then extrude or transform this edge. And if I already selected an edge, it's also interesting to know that you have creases, or the option to add creases. And this is an edge which doesn't have a crease. If you just go into add crease, then it looks like this. And you obviously can just select this part now, and you just say you don't want to have the crease, remove crease, and then it looks like this. So there are a lot of options also how to work with lines, with edge. You can also just with your string and shift key just select a point. For example, I just select these 2 points, and I can also go on add crease, and then you added just a crease to these 2 points. And if I just change to my tab view again, to my box mode, then it's probably also interesting of how to work with this, how to move this, how to transform this. I go again into align a plane and just move them down a little bit. And I think I have too many snaps activated here. I don't want this. These are just things you can do. I just change again to my smooth mode, and it's a really good way of modeling, changing between these two views. Very few things I still want to show you with this simple ball, so I just go back again because I think they're quite interesting. First of all, if you have a clear structure like this, a way of how to select the whole loop of the surface, you just hold your string shift key and you select this, you double click on the next one, and if there is a loop like this, then you can select it, and then obviously also move it or whatever you want to do. I think this is interesting to know. Another thing which is quite interesting, if I select these two faces and with tab key, I go again into my box view setting, and I have more object snap activated, then I can just use this scale element and just flatten it to one level, somewhere like this. And if I just change again to my smooth view, it looks like this. And if I just select one edge and I double click, okay, this double click that it selects the whole thing does not work so well. Let me see if I just double click here. Okay, I selected two. And if I go again into my shaded view and I just say here I would like to add creases, then you already have a nice object with a really nice and flat surface on top. Another nice function you definitely have to know is the bridge function. I don't think that you really need it for our exercise right now, but I just hold my Alt key and I just copy this to the left. So I have two elements. If I choose this face and this face, I have two selected. Then in my sub D tool, there is this bridge function. Let me see, bridge meshes here, and you can also see how many segments you have in between, and also has an impact obviously on your what it looks like. And this is really helpful or really interesting to work with this. And it's also like this, if you just have holes, for example, like a hole like this, and and a hole like this, and I just then double click on this and double click on this, then you can also bridge these two borders. Really useful. Based on this method, I was able to create a lot of variations, and the concept is still a transformation from the letter K to the letter T, and the aim was to get a really simple, more or less simple object for 3D printing. And I will show you very few more things based on my object. We come back to my basic design and will show you very few things on how you can work on this. First of all, I changed to ghost mode because sometimes a better view to see this. And I just go to box mode. And for example, what you can do is I just move it a little bit into this direction. I hold my shift string key, and from left to right, I just select these lines, and I shift this a little bit, and do this probably also here. And I shift this a little bit. I click my tab key and see what's going on. It lifted a little bit. It lifted a little bit the middle, and I can also go here a little bit lower again, and just see also what this does in my front view, because at the end of the day, it should sit on the table properly. And this changing between my box view and my smooth view is something I do quite a lot, and this is just something I did. I just do it a little bit extreme now and just see what's coming out of this. Anyhow, it's a little bit of try on how you would like to change your design. For example, here I move this down a lot. And also see what it does regarding my design. And if you remember what it looked like, I had some holes, some extruded holes. I just show you how I did this. If I select these surfaces, then I added, I subdivided these surfaces, and to a point that that there were areas, for example, like this part, which I was able to delete. Somewhere like this, and then I have my first hole, and the same thing on the other side, or for example, somewhere like this. And I just delete this. What you can also do, I hold my shift key, I select this edge, I double click, and I just selected the whole border. And here again, adjust my gumball change from align to C-plane to align to object, that it just can extrude it into the right direction. I select not my move tool, I select this extrusion tool, and then you can see that I can just extrude it, and I hold my shift key and can scale it, open, close, whatever I want. And this is something I obviously deselect. I also did with this part. And again, important, if I can't see my ball properly, then I just move in, and I just can extrude this. So this is more or less what I did. And after I found a solution which I was happy with and I had a lot of variations, I just copy this to the left, somewhere like this with my shift key, and I create an offset. And first of all, I had to think about how big this object should be printed. And this is a longer process in terms of thinking. I also have to see what is really printable. Is it nice to print edges like this? Do I want to have it more smooth? Do I need a substructure for the 3D printing? These are some things I have in my mind. It's not the topic right now, but we will discuss this in our lesson. So I would like to have an object which is not bigger than 10 centimeters in any directions. And a really handy tool is this box edit. If you can't see the box edit, you go into this option menu and you just select box edit from the menu bar, which you can't see right now because it's out of my record. And I just go into box edit, and really cool in terms of size, you can enter a size here. For example, if you have something which is too big, for example, like 12 centimeters via millimeters, you can just enter 80 millimeters, and it just shrinks down. And this is a really good tool to adjust your 3D object in any circumstances. I just press my enter key, and this is the level I would like to print it. And the only thing which is missing now is a nice offset. So I give this whole thing a little bit of dimensions. I select this object and I just enter offset. Sorry. And my command line offset subdivision, really important. And then you can already see that you see this little normal arrows which extrude to the outside. I think I would like to extrude it to the inside. I don't want to change the shape. And I hope that everything is not too narrow that I have a problem with my geometry. I just say flip all, and now it extrudes to the inside. I just go into distance, and here I would like, it's already set up, a distance of a thickness of 2 millimeters, which is quite thin. This is minimum I would recommend. Everything else I leave. Both sides no. This already looks good. Delete input, up to you. Really, I just say no, and this just means two things are on top of each other. And this is my object with my offset. And you can already see through this ghost mode in terms of your viewport setting, ghosted, that, that everything inside also looks quite good. I don't see any big problem. So I just changed to my shaded mode. And the only thing I don't like is that these top parts are a little bit thick, but we learned how to do this. We just select one edge, I double click and select the other edge, and then you can just say remove crease. And now it already looks like this. It has one sharp corner, and to compare this, I just do it here on this side slightly different. I just select both and double click here, and I just go into remove crease, and then it already looks really nice and fragile regarding my 3D printing. One more thing before we export it to our 3D printer. Of course, I can look at this in my rendered mode, and there is something like an EMAP. I just enter EMAP, and then you can just look at this with a glossy reflected mirror-like map, which is really good because that's a really good way of see if the surface is really nice and smooth, and if there are not any creases or something which at the end of the day you don't want. So the only thing we still have to do, we just have to export it to as an STL file to our 3D printer or our 3D printing program Perpecura. I just say export selected, and I just export this as an STL. Just scroll down, and here we have STL. I just call it whatever, KT01 as an STL. Okay, all the settings are fine. This all looks really good. And then I open my Cura Ultimaker, in this time Ultimaker program. I just go and open to disk, and I just open my KT0.1. And this is already my object, which looks good. Everything which is red potentially needs a little bit of a substructure. This is not a really big introduction of this 3D printing, but just to let you show very few things. Very few things I changed in terms of my settings. The printing temperature, I go a little bit higher, and everything else we talk about in another class. However, this looks good. My aim is to build without substructure. So the only substructure I want is here in this lower area, that it stands properly. So as a touching, I don't say everywhere, I just say touching build plate. And if I then go on to slicing, you can just see that it calculates it for my 3D printing. And now it's already finished. It takes 6 hours for printing. I can go in my preview. And when I go into my preview, first of all, I see here my substructure. I can have a look in terms of the simulation, what the layers look like. I don't do it in detail, but in principle, I think I would expect that it is already not bad. I didn't check it properly for if it's printable, but I think it looks good. This is without any substructure apart from, or support apart from, my building plate in the lower area. If I recalculate this again, you see the difference. Takes a little bit, and my aim is to print it without support structure inside. You can see now that there is a lot of support structure inside, which you don't need, or this is my aim that I don't need it. And it also takes much longer, now 9 hours. And in principle, you can save it now on your USB stick and load the 3D printer for 3D printing. Thanks for watching.